She was the calm one, the reasonable one, the one who knew how to stop fights before they exploded. When her father's voice changed, she noticed first. When her mother went silent, she adjusted herself immediately. When tension entered the room, she absorbed it before anyone else had to feel it. By the age of 9, she already knew something most adults never learn. Peace inside a family is often carried by one person, and that person usually disappears while carrying it. Dark psychology calls this role the peacemaker child, the child who becomes emotionally responsible for everyone else long before they are emotionally allowed to become themselves, the child who learns that love is safest when conflict is prevented, the child who becomes so skilled at managing other people's emotions that eventually they lose all connection to their own. This is not the story of a dramatic family. There was no screaming every day, no visible violence, no obvious cruelty. From the outside, her family looked functional, warm, even. And that is precisely why the wound remained invisible for 34 years. Because the most damaging family roles are often rewarded. 4 seconds. Her name is Claire. She is 41 years old. She grew up between two emotionally unpredictable parents. Not evil people, not monsters. Just two adults who had never learned how to regulate pain without leaking it into everyone around them. Her father became cold when stressed. Her mother became emotionally overwhelmed. Arguments arrived suddenly and disappeared without resolution. And somewhere in the middle of those emotional weather systems, Claire adapted. At first, the adaptation looked beautiful. She became empathetic, sensitive, helpful, mature beyond her age. Teachers loved her. Relatives praised her. She's such a good girl. She never causes trouble. She keeps everyone together. But dark psychology identifies something terrifying about children who become easy. Children are not naturally easy. Healthy children are loud, messy, emotional, needy. A child who becomes emotionally convenient too early is usually adapting to an environment where their authentic emotions feel dangerous. Claire learned very quickly that conflict created instability, and instability created fear. So she began preventing conflict before it happened. If her mother seemed overwhelmed, Claire became quieter. If her father came home angry, Claire became agreeable. If tension rose at dinner, Claire changed the subject. If her younger brother cried, Claire comforted him before the parents even reacted. Nobody told her to do this. That is what makes the role so powerful. The peacemaker child volunteers for emotional labor because the family silently rewards it. Dark psychology identifies 5 mechanisms inside the peacemaker wound. The first is hypervigilance. The peacemaker child becomes emotionally surveillance-oriented. They constantly scan tone, facial expressions, body language, pauses, footsteps, sighs. They develop an almost frightening sensitivity to emotional shifts. Not because they are gifted, because safety depends on prediction. Their nervous system learns that if they can detect tension early enough, they might stop the explosion. The second mechanism is self-erasure. The peacemaker child unconsciously learns that their own emotions are secondary to maintaining stability. Their sadness becomes inconvenient. Their anger becomes dangerous. Their needs become selfish. So they suppress them, not once, thousands of times, until eventually suppression no longer feels like suppression. It feels like personality. The third mechanism is emotional parentification. The child begins emotionally parenting the adults. They comfort the parent after arguments, manage emotional atmospheres, protect siblings from tension, stabilize family dynamics. And because they are praised for their maturity, they never realize they were robbed. The fourth mechanism is identity fusion. The peacemaker no longer knows where helping ends and selfhood begins. Their identity becomes organized around usefulness. If they are not needed, they feel invisible. sometimes even worthless. And the fifth mechanism, the one dark psychology considers the most devastating, is delayed collapse. Because the peacemaker survives childhood through functionality, they become high-achieving adults, reliable partners, emotionally intelligent friends. But eventually, the nervous system that carried everyone else becomes too exhausted to continue carrying itself, and collapse arrives, usually quietly, usually later, usually in the middle of what looks like a perfectly successful life. Claire collapsed at 39, not publicly, not dramatically. Her marriage ended after 15 years. And what destroyed it was not cruelty, it was exhaustion. Her husband told her something during their final conversation that she said felt like hearing the truth spoken out loud for the first time. He said, "I don't know who you are when you're not managing everyone." And she realized he was right. She knew how to soothe, how to anticipate, how to stabilize, how to absorb tension, but she did not know how to exist honestly inside conflict, because honesty had never felt safe. Dark psychology observes something deeply tragic about peacemaker children. They often become adults who are loved for how emotionally useful they are, while remaining completely unseen emotionally themselves. People describe them as calming, supportive, strong, but almost nobody asks them a simple question: who supports you? Claire said therapy felt unbearable at first, because her therapist kept asking questions no one had ever asked her before. What do you want? What makes you angry? What would happen if you disappointed someone? And every question felt impossible to answer, because peacemakers do not build identities around desire. They build identities around prevention. At one point, her therapist told her something that changed the way she understood her entire childhood. She said, "You were not keeping the peace. You were protecting the family from emotional reality." And suddenly everything rearranged itself. The family peace had never actually been peace. It had been avoidance. And she had spent 30 years acting as the emotional bridge, holding unresolved pain together. That realization changed the family system immediately. Because once a peacemaker stops absorbing tension, the family must finally face the tension directly, and most families do not react well to that. Claire stopped mediating arguments between her parents, stopped smoothing over uncomfortable conversations, stopped translating emotions for everyone else, stopped apologizing for things that were never her responsibility. And the family became angry, not because she became cruel, because she became unavailable for the role. Dark psychology calls this system panic. When one member stops performing their assigned role, the family experiences it as betrayal, even if the role itself was unhealthy. Her mother accused her of becoming distant. Her father called her selfish. Her brother said the family was falling apart lately. But the family had always been falling apart. Claire had simply been hiding the sound. The hardest part was discovering how conditional her value had become inside the family structure. As long as she absorbed pain, she was loved openly. When she stopped, the warmth changed, not fully, but enough to notice, enough to grieve. And this is what dark psychology teaches most clearly about the peacemaker child. The family often mistakes your emotional labor for your identity. When you stop carrying everyone, people may genuinely believe you have changed. But sometimes the truth is simpler. You only stop disappearing. Claire's healing began with very small acts: saying no without explanation, allowing silence during conflict, not rescuing uncomfortable conversations, leaving texts unanswered for a few hours, admitting she was angry. The first time she admitted anger openly, she cried afterward from guilt. Not because anger was wrong, because childhood had trained her nervous system to associate honesty with danger. Healing for peacemakers is slow because they are not learning how to become kind. They were already kind. They are learning how to stop sacrificing themselves in exchange for stability. And those are very different things. 2 years later, Claire described a moment that told her she was finally changing. Her parents began arguing during dinner. The old version of her would have intervened immediately, changed the subject, made a joke, smoothed the atmosphere. Instead, she stayed silent, not cold, not angry, just present. And eventually the argument became uncomfortable enough that her parents had to face each other directly. For the first time in 40 years, the peace belonged to them, not to her. Dark psychology teaches that the peacemaker child carries one of the most invisible wounds in family systems because society rewards emotional self-sacrifice, especially in daughters, especially in good children. But the long-term cost is devastating. The peacemaker learns how to regulate everyone except themselves, how to maintain relationships without intimacy, how to prevent abandonment by becoming emotionally indispensable. And eventually, they forget they were supposed to have a self too. Claire said something near the end that stayed with me, something she wished someone had told her when she was little. She said, "You were never responsible for keeping adults emotionally stable. You were a child standing in the middle of storms trying to hold the walls together with your hands. And everyone called you mature because they did not want to admit the walls should never have been your responsibility in the first place." Tell me something honestly. Were you the peacemaker child? Did your family call you the calm one, the mature one, the easy one? Have you ever felt exhausted from carrying emotions that were never yours to carry? Have you ever stopped fixing everyone and watched people become angry that you finally chose yourself? Tell me below, because the peacemaker wound is one of the quietest wounds in family psychology. It hides inside kindness, inside maturity, inside emotional intelligence. And the people carrying it are usually the last people anyone thinks to ask if they're tired. This is where it can finally be named. Subscribe for the next story. A son who spent his entire life trying to earn love from a father who only respected strength until the day he stopped trying. And the silence between them revealed what the relationship had actually been built on. I'll see you then.